Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I wanted to spend some time with you today to go over some basics of tablet design. And today we will actually go through a couple of best practices and just use cases for you to consider while you go through your design process. So from our session, I would like you to take away some knowledge about the nuances between tablet design and other forms of design, so designing for desktop or designing for mobile. I would love for us to explore different use cases and contexts where tablet design is more helpful than hurtful. So in some cases where mobile is not appropriate or desktop's not appropriate, where the tablet experience can fill in those gaps. And then I would love for you to be able to take this material and actually apply it to your tablet design project. Um, so another kind of way for you to consider thinking about this as you're going through your digital design practice is that tablets are an emerging medium for content consumption and creation. So folks have tablets for creating artwork or using it for photo manipulation purposes, so using Photoshop or Adobe Spark, for example. Some folks are also using it for content consumption, like I'd mentioned, so being able to read content, so read ebooks or watch movies, video conference, or FaceTime with their friends. A lot of these are done on tablets because it provides more screen space than a mobile phone, but also gives a little bit more freedom in terms of interaction and definitely more portability than having a desktop or a laptop computer. One other point of consideration is that more than 30% of Americans own a tablet device. And a tablet device is generally not seen as the only digital product in a household. So in some cases, some households may have only a computer or only a phone. However, a tablet is generally seen as more of a supplementary device, meaning that the users will probably have an experience that connects their tablet device with another product. So here, some households can have a tablet with a desktop or a tablet with a mobile phone, but very rarely is the tablet their only source of digital content. So let's dive into some of the basics and principles and best practices for designing for tablet. Before we dive into that, I would like to kind of review this slide here from a previous lecture about the design philosophy, sorry, of tablet design. So as I mentioned previously, with mobile phones here, for example, so mobile phone, we tend to reference this as a lean forward technology, meaning I am I'm looking at the content. It is very snackable. The content area is small, so I have to engage with it and be immersed with it. Whereas here with a tablet, it's a little bit larger than a phone. So in this case, this is an e-reader, it's on an iPad, but you can actually see the size difference between a phone and the screen size of a tablet. So in this case, the tablet, because it's used mostly for recreation or for finding content to then dive in deeper on a different device, it tends to be referenced as a lean back technology, meaning I am leaning back to, so in this case, this photo here, we lean back to consume this type of content because there's additional screen space, there's an opportunity for content density. So here I'm reading a book, and it would be very difficult for me to read this book hunched over very far. But in this case, I can actually have the screen a little bit farther away. I can sit on the couch. I don't have to essentially kind of scrunch myself and scrunch my eyes in order to see this content. Um, in some cases, the information on tablets actually closely mirror the desktop experience. And sometimes it's done to save money because companies don't have funds or time to invest into a tablet-specific experience. In other cases, a desktop experience doesn't render very well on mobile because of the screen size limitation. So that's where the tablet sizes kind of come into play. And with tablet devices, they also tend to be an intermediary device. So again, your tablet, your tablets tend to sync with a desktop, laptop, or a mobile phone. Very rarely is the tablet the only sole source of digital content or the only digital device in a household. They tend to be supplementary, they also tend to rely on a different device as well to enhance that experience or to at least continue it. So some use cases for you to consider as you design for tablet include being able to browse the web. So tablets, so depending on the age of the device and when it was purchased, the operating system may not be able to download all of the most recent apps that are coming out in the App Store or in the Google Play Store. So the web tends to be kind of this default digital experience where being able just to access a website will still provide the same level of interaction and content as the counterpart apps do. Tablets are also used for content generation. So because tablets just have more screen real estate, some of them are actually more technologically equipped for content creation, such as the Wacom tablets that are used in digital design. There's other tablet apps like Photoshop Express or Adobe Spark. Those are also used for content generation. But being able to upload photos or manipulate content, being able to record videos, being able to draw or physically take notes. These are all things that are possible on a tablet device, and they're a little bit easier to use because of this extra screen real estate. Some of these products are available on mobile, but again, because of the screen size, they don't lend themselves as well to those use cases. Lastly, your tablet devices tend to oftentimes be used for content consumption. So here, being able to read books or reading the news or read social media feeds, etc., it becomes a way to immerse with that content, especially if it requires little to no work but requires a significant amount of time. So again, that lean back technology lends itself to kind of relaxing into information and not so much kind of hunting and pecking for content. Okay, so when when are there appropriate times to support tablet design? Um, of course, as a designer, I would love to say all of the time we should always support all the devices that our users have, but I know that that's also not very realistic from a time perspective or budgeting perspective. So in this case, some of the questions that I would like for you to ask yourself or ask the team in which you design for or design on is the first, is there sufficient interest from your users to have a tablet specific experience? So let's take a product like Netflix, for example. I've never worked there, so this is all kind of conjecture. But, but Netflix is a video streaming service where you can watch TV shows and movies. So naturally, if I have a device, any device, I'd like to be able to watch a video on there. So being able to watch it on desktop and my laptop are great. Being able to watch on my phone would be even better because I can watch movies on the go. So if I'm on the train or the bus, I'm able to still consume that content. Being able to have it on tablet is also another added bonus. So even though it doesn't break or make the experience for Netflix as a whole, being able to watch videos on a portable screen that is larger than my phone would have added benefits. However, there may be other expectations of your users. In the Netflix example, they may want to download content or share content or annotate content. So it really comes down to knowing your customers and users and what their expectations are depending on the medium. Something else to ask yourself is if your analytics for your site or your app is there currently traffic coming from tablets? So in some cases, even if you're not optimized for that medium, people will still try to access your content. So in the case that you notice kind of this uptick in traffic from a particular device, sometimes that's a signal for you to actually begin designing specific experiences around it. There's also user research that can be done to uncover what some of those expectations are, or if there's just for some reason a fluke and they can't access your information on desktop because of some sort of technology issues, so they immediately reach for a tablet. So it's up to you to kind of discuss this with your users and to learn more about these behaviors and patterns that they're showing. One last question that you should consider while debating whether or not to support tablet design in your product suite is if you need to provide additional functionality. So in this case, your website or your app may get you, 80% of the way there, but if there's a gap that the tablet view could help bridge, then it's probably something worth pursuing. So if we take, for example, restaurant point of sale systems, you could certainly have a point of sale system for maybe, let's say, McDonald's, for example. Every single cashier or customer service agent can have a phone, maybe like a mobile device, with a McDonald's app loaded onto it, where it's just for the customer service agent or the cashier to be able to punch in an order and to collect funds. Similarly, they can also have a computer that they can work at. So maybe it's not like the big laptops or the big screens that we're used to, but maybe some sort of kiosk or desktop-like setup in order to punch in the orders and to send them off to the line. Now, the flip side is that you can also try exploring the notion of a tablet design. So tablet design has been really, has kind of taken off for point of sale systems. So things like Square or Clover, a couple of other point of sale systems I can't think of right now, utilize iPads or utilize an Android tablet or a tablet-like device where a cashier can punch in some content, so being able to punch in an order and then flip it so that the customer on the other side can actually swipe their card and digitally sign their name. So in that case, there is added functionality from a hardware perspective and just more of a portability standard that's provided with a tablet that you can't achieve with a that you can't achieve with a mobile device or a desktop experience. As you pursue your tablet design work, one important thing that I want you to be able to take away from this entire lecture is that you should not copy or stretch your mobile design. So it's not about taking what's on this little screen and just making it longer or wider or taller to fit whatever dimensions of the tablets that you're planning on supporting. But it's more so about designing the right information and the right content and interactions into this specific experience. So if you're going through the trouble of designing for a new device or a new device size, it wouldn't make sense for you to just stretch the content if it only works on mobile. So just stretching the content itself will waste a lot of space. Visually, it might look really disjointed, especially depending on the type of product that you're designing. By just stretching the design, again, you kind of lose that opportunity to design something really unique and powerful that takes advantage of all of that digital design real estate that you now have. And it also kind of signifies to an audience that you're ignoring all the reasons why they would even use a tablet in the first place, because you think that it's just interchangeable, the mobile experience and the tablet experience. So again, if you are pursuing tablet design as a standalone product or as part of a suite of products, make sure that you take the time to identify those unique use cases and those problems that your customers or users are facing for that tablet and designing something customized for them. So let's go ahead and move over and talk about some tablet design usability. So there's a couple of things that you should keep in mind, not only throughout the design process, but as you test your design with users or through launches and iterations along the line. With tablet design, because of the additional screen real estate, it's very easy to get lost in a stack of pages or in a linear kind of timeline of content. So make sure that you have just the basics of navigation clearly surfaced on the screen. So there's an inherent difference between Apple tablet devices and Android tablet devices, where most of the Android tablet devices will have a physical back button that's kind of built into the device already. So it's in the hardware. And if it's not in the hardware, then it's persistent software that's actually on the screen. So knowing that your back button can actually live in a lot of different places will affect the manifestation of your digital design. So some companies will only support iPads or only support Google tablets, but in the case that you have to support all of them, it's just important to keep in mind that any of the affordances that you use for navigation all kind of live in the same area so that customers and users know what to expect as they kind of shift their experiences between devices. So an Apple device, I think Kindle and Windows, they have back buttons, but they're mostly in the top left, and those are generally native hooks that you build in based on the operating system, whereas the Android devices tend to have it built into their hardware or a persistent software navigation. Additionally, being able to find the search tool is super important in this case. I know that some operating systems have a sense of global search, meaning that they'll search not only the content that's on your device, but also just around the web. So they might actually use Bing or Google as that search engine. So get to know your device and the operating system and the expectations of search in that case, and make sure that you build in the appropriate experiences needed. There are some cases where the app itself or the company itself will have its own search mechanism. So if we take Amazon, for example, Amazon has its own Amazon search experience. But then if you combine that with the Windows experience, then you also have the search charm where you kind of pull it off to the side, you hit search, and it acts as more of a global search. So not just searching the content on your device, but the content in other apps, as well as content around the web. So just get to know what functionality is available for those specific operating systems and hardware, and make sure that it lives harmoniously with your design. Some usability issues that arise with tablet design is actually the lighting condition in which these experiences are being rendered. So here I've got a couple of examples. We have a gentleman here kind of looking at something kind of crouched down, reading or interacting with the screen here in the dark. We have another person who is reading on their tablet, but they're in bright sunlight. So here she's got a sun hat on, so I'm guessing it's summertime and she's reading by the pool. And then we have another photo here of someone actually on their tablet, but in a moving car. So as we contextualize where these devices will be used, it's important to design, to use like color palettes and tap targets and visuals that will kind of survive all of these conditions. So the unfortunate thing with one size fits all that it generally leaves someone or some device out. But in this case, usability for tablet becomes really important because of the portable nature of these devices. And it becomes even more important, I would say, than the lighting conditions for your phone. So with more modern phones and operating systems, they're able to adjust the brightness or the contrast based on the light sensors and the light that's kind of shown around the phone. So if you're in somewhere bright, then it actually increases the brightness, for example, so that you can see the content on your phone while it's high noon. Whereas with tablets, since tablets are a little bit more expensive, they're a little larger, they're actually not upgraded as frequently as a mobile phone. So some of those technologies to auto set the contrast or brightness, they just don't exist in tablets right now, for at least some tablets. So just keep in mind that the different color palettes that you use and the contrast levels of the elements on your screen is something that you need to pay attention to as you design your tablet experiences. So these lighting variations should also support should support different types of lighting and different contexts in which this person will be using their app. So if they use it in their car on the bus, then being able to have tap targets that are large enough and that don't rely on very precise selection will be more helpful and be more usable. Being able to design for all different lighting systems. So for instance, the Kindle, so like my Kindle device here, you can actually set different levels of contrast and brightness depending on where you want to read. And you can actually have presets that are set up previously. So in some cases, if I want to read a book, I can still read it inside because I can increase the brightness, or I can read outside by decreasing the brightness. And in that case, it's a very manual process. But again, depending on the hardware, sometimes it's done automatically. So we discussed color palettes and using appropriate colors and contrast. One thing to keep in mind, I've noticed with operating systems for mobile phones, which will kind of bleed over into the tablet operating systems, is this concept of dark mode. So being able to being able to override the settings of something that's black text on white, like for this, for example, but being able to actually see the reverse, being able to see a black background with white text on it. Sometimes that's done to help reduce eye strain because of the bright white. So make sure that your design colors and your design schema also supports dark mode or the ability for your visuals to be overridden by accessibility technologies. For your tablet designs, testing actually becomes even more important because of all of these different use cases. So I advocate, at least for tablet design, for most of the design rather, but especially for tablet, is that you don't test in a lab scenario. So a lab, I put that in quotes because we don't have research labs, but a lab scenario would be something that's very tightly controlled, where you're able to really kind of craft these questions to lead them down a very specific path. Again, with tablet experiences, these tablet devices are very mobile. People take them on the bus, they take them on a car ride, they take them on a plane, on a boat. But we need to do our testing in that context. So if you have a device or you have an experience that's meant to be traveled with, then by all means, make sure that as you run your sessions, they're not just in a desk, in a small quiet room or at a noisy coffee shop. You need to actually put them in the right mindset and the right context so that you can get the information not only from a product design perspective, but also from a usability perspective, the things to improve for that. So you should also test for people with different levels of technical abilities. So tablets, again, tend to be this intermediary product between desktop and mobile. So the people that end up with tablets could be more proficient in both of the technologies or both of those devices. But in some cases, that might be their primary device as well, and it might not have as many capabilities. So know that there's a much larger spread in technical abilities when it comes to tablet than some of the other mediums you may be designing for. As you go through your design work, also consider device orientation. So sometimes we think that we're only designing in portrait, we're only designing in landscape. But for some of our customers or users, they might expect an experience to work both ways. So make sure you uncover that through, again, interviews or user research or any analytics that your current digital properties have access to. Being able to support both could be a luxury for some or a necessity for others. So again, it's about knowing who you're designing for and the specific benefits of your product. I've seen other apps and other companies kind of lock the design based on the orientation. So even if you have your settings set where you can go between landscape and portrait, in the cases of some companies, they only allow you to use your app in portrait mode or only in landscape mode. Or sometimes it starts in portrait and then it forces you to landscape. So make sure you weigh the decisions of forcing someone into that path, especially for content that's multimedia driven. So with videos, of course, videos on a widescreen are the way that things are filmed on camera. But not everyone wants to turn their phone sideways while they're watching a video. So just make sure you find accommodations for both orientations if you're not supporting them. You should also ask yourself if there will be different functionality that's available between portrait and landscape. So for the most part, I can use YouTube to view movies and videos in landscape mode, but then I use portrait mode in order to be able to browse. However, on Facebook, I can actually view videos in portrait mode and in landscape mode without any reduction in functionality. So again, kind of weigh the pros and cons of reducing functionality based on portrait or landscape orientation, but also just get to know your customers and their expectations of how they want to interact with it. And that will help you better guide you in terms of which orientation to focus on, or if using both or transitioning between the two would be valuable. Because we have so much more space with our tablet design work, it's very important for you to make good use of that space. So we certainly don't need to fill it up to the brim with content, but having a larger kind of screen real estate or a larger device allows you to show and introduce more complex digital interactions, or being able to show more complex information without having to reduce it too far down. So, for example, you can download textbooks or buy textbooks on Amazon, and you can definitely read them on the e-reader. However, some of these experiences for your textbooks have been optimized for a tablet like the Kindle Fire or the iPad or some other Android reading device. And that's because with the textbook, you might actually have more tools and more features that you need than if you were reading a romance novel, for example. So if you're reading a biology textbook, you would want to highlight things on a screen or being able to circle things and take notes and annotations. You might need to clip some content and send it off to your classmate. Whereas if you're curling up in bed reading a romance novel, you may not want to do any of those things. You just want to, read the content and just get through it. So again, know your audience, uncover these use cases through interviews or just having some sort of informed opinion or hypothesis based on your product. And consider all of the different use cases and contexts in which someone will actually use that tablet. So not everyone, again, is in a lab setting or a classroom setting where they have this kind of perfect prototype on a device and they just use it in that context. But many cases with tablets, folks are portable and devices are portable. So we need to be able to design for all of those scenarios so that your product is still usable depending on whichever context they're switching to. So here was a visual example of what I'd mentioned. So we have a digital device. They're both digital devices, but here we have kind of this lower end Kindle Fire where you use it for e-reading and also downloading content, but there's customizations that you can make for accessibility purposes. So you can have your text size really large or just small like you would see in a print book. You can adjust line spacing and increase or decrease your margins and even change the different color modes. So here we have black text on white, and then we have white text on black, and then we have the sepia tone. However, on the right, we see this Kindle Fire experience where you can actually download comic books and read them as well. So side by side with your textbooks or your novels. So again, in this case, with a smaller device, we may tend to lean forward. Lean back a little. With mobile, we end up leaning forward a little bit because of the reduced content area and just there's less content density. But here, with this really beautiful fit and finish comic book, we may be more inclined to relax into the content and lean back with it. So here's where contrast and color choices become really important. All right, so with tablet and larger screen real estate sizes, we're also concerned about having persistent design elements. So persistent design elements can refer to things like signing up or signing in. They can refer to navigation elements or even points of personalization. So being able to say, hi, welcome back, David. Let's continue, let's pick up where you left off on your mobile device. So being able to provide that sense of consistency by persisting content throughout different devices, again, helps your user feel like they're in a very consistent and streamlined experience. So if they start shopping for a backpack on their phone, for example, when they go to their tablet experience, they should also see that type of content. So it shouldn't feel like they're starting brand new from scratch. And you can generally introduce things like signing up for an account or signing into an account in order to kind of bridge that gap between the different devices. Being able to use your kind of sign-in functions and account information between devices becomes even more important. Generally, I've not seen things that are built like database specific for a device type. So this is an expectation really in interaction design. That something that works on one device will definitely work on another. One other piece of information that's important to keep in mind is that you should always make a very crucial functionality visible. So again, tablet devices are very portable and people that are using it are generally, moving or doing multiple things at the same time. So being able to have really concise buttons, really easy to find navigation, easy to find search, being able to swipe through content very quickly without having to dive into and drill down for a lot of information becomes really important. So just consider these scenarios where someone is multitasking or someone is in a state of travel or movement, and design around that, and make sure you kind of anchor your design in these persistent design elements. With tablet design as well, you should consider the different kind of these different ways of inputting information or different ways of interacting with the screen. So with a tablet, you can not only tap on the screen, but you could connect another device to it and also use that as a pointer, or you can connect a keyboard to it and then tab through everything. So using the actual tab button on the keyboard. So if it's laid out correctly from a backend standpoint, you should be able to tap through all of the navigation elements and the things on screen for your screen reader to narrate to you. So make sure you design around those different inputs, or at least you keep them in mind as you're going through your design process. So if you're designing a point of sale system that you know will be used inside McDonald's, then chances are someone isn't going to use a mouse or a keyboard in order to interact with your point of sale system. They'll actually just use their finger. So just keep in mind the context and scenarios in which your product will be used, and design the right inputs or methods of inputs that is appropriate for that particular environment. So being able to tap on something kind of reduces the degree of accuracy. So I should be able to tap kind of around the area and still land on home or still land on search. Whereas for your desktop experiences or laptop experiences, they'll actually have a mouse, and that cursor or that pointer can really select something that's fine-tuned or in a very small area. So just know the limitations of the medium that you're designing for. Here is an example of the Gmail mail app for Android. So you can see that it's Android because of the persistent back button, home button, and the window view. But here I've turned it black and white, but I've also used these kind of red boxes to illustrate to you the kind of tap target or the tappable areas to surface more content. So if we were to look at the top left box, that's a bounding box for social. So it has the little icon for people and then the word social. It says Google and then one new. So in this case, if I tap in that general area, it will go to that filter with that content. I don't have to use my pinky and point specifically or tap specifically on the humans or the little the number badge or just the word social. I can actually tap anywhere in that area and it'll surface more information. Similarly, with the being able to star a message, here generally in that area, if I tap around it or on it, it will kind of save or flag this message. I don't need to close one of my eyes and use my pinky and try to point and tap at that individual star. I have a margin of error, and that's essentially what tap targets are. It gives you this invisible kind of bounding box where your app knows that this area of the screen is where you would interact with in order to do something else. And it's not only specifying the interaction, but also how you interact with it. So in this case, I can tap on a button and it takes an action. So I can tap on the star and it adds it to my favorites or it flags it for me. However, maybe I could swipe on it and then it would do something else, or I can double tap on it and it does something else. So again, you have a lot of inputs at your disposal because it's not only a tap device, but it's also a larger screen that can be connected to a keyboard. So understand again what your users want to do with your product and design around those inputs accordingly. So some last pieces of information to leave you with are the operating system level functionality that you can utilize in your tablet product design. So here we have kind of the spectrum of devices that have been created by Apple So it starts off at first gen, ends at 6, but we're way beyond that. So when you use the operating system design systems, meaning you use what's been natively built for that ecosystem. So if you use Apple's design system with their look and feel and their operating system hooks, it means that as their hardware and software improves over time, your product will inherit those upgrades. Similarly, your product will degrade. So depending on the device that is older, your product should still work and function as well as it can for that level in their operating system. So being able to use their native designs or their native design elements and to engineer it in such a way that you actually use their code base means that you're supported in both directions, at least to a particular limit. However, if you decide to design things from scratch and to kind of engineer things as you need them, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to support these older devices and to be able to support people with all different types of needs. So just keep that in mind as you work with your team to make decisions on implementation. So for design class, you probably won't need to code anything and just send it off to the App Store. But in the case that you start working on this with your internship or a job, being able to make those decisions up front in terms of how it's engineered will help inform the way that you design it. So again, using kind of this, I'm gonna move this over here, being able to use their native operating system design elements means that your product will upgrade and degrade more gracefully than if you were to design it and to engineer it from scratch. There's also a precedent for being able to reuse patterns and affordances across these different devices as well. So, for instance, if you were to design a way for someone to input information, so in Gmail, for example, being able to type up an email, if I can figure out how to type up an email on Gmail on my phone, then if you reuse the same affordances, then I will be able to do so with very little struggle or learning curve on a tablet device. Because you'll use the same affordances, they won't look or behave very differently. So if I know how to use one, I'll be able to use the other. And that helps save time for your users. Okay. So here I have some examples of, again, that keyboard analogy of being able to type something in on an Android tablet and being able to type something in on an Android phone. A lot of the functionality and core functionality is there. Visually, they look the same. And in this case, an Android keyboard is an Android keyboard. So by kind of tapping into operating system level design systems, you are also able to take advantage of native functionality in the device itself. So what that means is that depending on the tablet, if it's not an e-reader, but an Android tablet or an iPad, you'll be able to use some of the other sensors and kind of technology components to help inform or improve your design work. So with tablet devices, they generally have GPS or Wi-Fi or an accelerometer. So you can create experiences that are aware of those kind of sensor inputs. Similarly, so not just through the device technology, but through the product that you're designing, you can also reuse the elements, the native elements that you've created for, let's say, login or register on a cell phone or on your mobile phone, and you can actually reuse and repurpose that for your tablet device. This tends to be more true for products and devices that are in the same ecosystem. So going from iPhone to iPad, for example, and it's less compatible when you're going from Apple to Android, because things that are built for Apple are for Apple. Similarly, things that are built for Android are built for or just for Android. So it's hard to port between the two, although there's some products and technologies that exist to help with the conversion. if there's an issue between converting content from one place to another, then I see most companies and products relying on a mobile web experience or a specific breakpoint for tablet. When designing for tablets, I would also focus on erring on the side of caution and reusing your mobile affordances. So making things more tappable, being able to make buttons much larger and anchoring navigation towards the bottom or anchoring search towards the top. Being able to use mobile affordances, one, helps cut down on the amount of rework that you do. But again, it also introduces this level of familiarity with your product. So again, if they know how to use the mobile experience, they'll then be able to translate kind of their experience with your mobile device into the tablet experience. Right. So because you have more screen real estate to design for, there are some other considerations that you'll need to think about as you're working through the different types of information that you decide to show in your app. So for instance, being able to swipe on your tablet, so being able to swipe horizontally or vertically. This was a problem that I came across during my first project at Amazon, where I designed a shopping experience for Amazon, but specifically for the Windows operating system. So you can swipe left and right and top to bottom. So it became really confusing for my customers, and it became confusing internally for us at Amazon as well. So if you will have one or the other or both, it's important for you to kind of understand when these interactions will differ and why they differ, and if you even want to use both on the same screen. So for my design work with Amazon, in an effort to reuse a lot of design work, Amazon mostly scrolls up and down on a product detail page, but we do have elements that kind of bleed off the page where you scroll left and right. Except because they're rendered on desktop, you actually click on the little arrow to move through that content. In this case, you can't really swipe on it because it's a desktop experience. However, reusing that design into the tablet world just wasn't as successful as we thought it would be, because it was confusing for customers who were scrolling up and down, sometimes wanting to swipe left and right on content area that normally goes up and down. Just was a clash in their expectations. I've seen this kind of pan out with real estate apps as well, where in some cases you can tap on, let's say, a pin for a home that's being sold, and there's a little card that comes up with photos of the place and how much it costs and square footage. But then even in that area, you can still do these small little mini swipes to essentially work through a carousel of other photos of that property as well. So I would just be careful. Again, you have a lot of screen real estate, so it's very easy to like kind of peck. Well, here we go. It's easy to peck at content, but depending on the device size, you might actually have someone laying down their hand in order to write something or to draw something. So being able to specify the way that you can scroll and the way that your device kind of reads all of those different inputs simultaneously will be important for the usability of your product. With mobile, this infinite scroll paradigm has kind of taken off with social media. So you can kind of scroll forever on your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed. Similarly, you can do that with Pinterest as well. So that's great for a browsing experience, but also it keeps things a little bit interesting for mobile because it wants to invite you back to essentially engage with it again or to continue engaging with it. However, it can be very difficult for someone on tablet to use something like an infinite scroll. So we may be spear fishing for content, so searching for something really specific and getting that information and then reviewing it on desktop. But using an infinite scroll to present finite information just becomes a bad model to apply. So I mentioned before that you can reuse mobile design affordances in tablet. I would be very cautious of that particular one because it may not work well for your audience. But again, the context is key, and being able to pull from user data will help inform the types of layouts and the types of design work that you want to apply to your product. And just because you have all of the screen real estate, it doesn't mean that you have to fill it with content. You can still keep the content snackable, but in the case where they want that detailed view or more detailed content, they can still tap through and find it. So don't feel the need to turn this into a desktop experience where you cram as much in as possible or to reduce very far as you would with mobile, but you can still strike a good balance in between. In my design work, I hear a lot about intuitive design, and I've been known to have a lot of opinions on this, including that there's nothing that's intuitive about design. Everything actually needs to be learned. So if you were to put a device in front of a child or in front of someone who's never seen technology before, they need to learn essentially how to use the device before, or how to, they need to understand the affordances and how to interact with this screen or with these inputs before they can actually get a grasp for taking advantage of all the content that's on those devices. So nothing is intuitive. Blinking and breathing, your heartbeat, those are intuitive because they just happen. But everything else actually needs to be learned. So just because you think that swiping left or swiping right is a very common interaction for some people, they're just not aware that those types of affordances exist. So being able to teach them and to use this opportunity to kind of provide tutorials or instructions on how to interact with content becomes even more important. You can reuse a lot of the same inputs mechanisms on mobile as you could on tablet. So things like dragging or double tapping or pinch zoom or spread, those are things that are available on mobile. So if your users know how to do that on mobile, chances are they'll port it over to their tablet experiences. There are times in which you can break these patterns for both tablet and mobile, but you have to do so very selectively and for a very good reason as well. So again, these operating system level inputs and affordances have been built, and they have built a level of expectation for your users. So they expect the calendar view in iPhone to look and behave a certain way, and that would port over to your iPad. So if you start changing your taps to a long press, so if I tap in my calendar to view the details of a day, they would expect to be able to tap and view details in the same way for your tablet. But if you have tap on mobile and then you have a long press in tablet, then that may create a level of confusion. So just if you change the models or the interaction patterns for a device to make it specific for that device, just keep in mind that there is a learning curve for your users. And the learning curve between mobile and tablet, they tend to stay in the same ecosystem, so it's easier to go back and forth. Really the trouble that you get into is your mobile or tablet device with a desktop design. So we've got a couple of resources that you can check out if you want to learn more about tablet design. So the Nielsen Norman Group is a group based out of San Francisco. They do a lot of design work as well as studies with regard to interaction design. So they actually have this very thorough report called Tablet Website and Application UX Report. Very, matter of fact. So that's about 100 pages or so, I think. It's a great read. I don't expect you to read all of it, but it might be a good idea just to download it and skim it, or to use it as a reference document as you're working through your design project. There's also operating system level documentation so that you can learn more about what's the types of tools and resources that are available to you as a designer for your Android project, Apple project, or Windows design project. But other than that, I hope you learned a lot, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks.